The annual family barbecue was in full swing, the air thick with the smell of lighter fluid, and my uncle's loud performative happiness. My uncle, Rick, a man who mistook his own volume for absolute truth, had me cornered by the wilting potato salad. "So, Elisa," he started, his voice already too loud for the space. "Still doing that computer thing?" I gave him my practiced, non-committal answer, the one designed to end conversations before they could hurt. "I work in IT for a government contractor, Uncle Rick." He let out a bellowing laugh, the kind that commands attention and demands others join in. It was the same hollow sound I remembered from when I told him I wasn't going into sales, just an IT tech. He roared, clapping my father on the shoulder hard enough to make him spill his drink. "When are you going to do something important with your life?" I just smiled. It was a small, tight, tired thing I had perfected over decades. Saying nothing was always safer than trying to explain a life they had no framework to understand. Across the lawn, I could feel the familiar heat of shame radiating from my parents, Mark and Susan, a couple who believed social harmony was worth any private sacrifice. Their unease wasn't in my defense, it was embarrassment that a scene was being made. They just wanted the moment to pass, for me to shrink back into the background where they were comfortable with me being. But then a sound cut through the forced chatter. A low, serious rumble that didn't belong in our quiet suburban cul-de-sac. A sleek, black SUV, the kind with tinted windows that seemed to swallow the sunlight, had pulled into our driveway. The entire party went silent. The cheerful music suddenly felt cheap and intrusive. A man in a severe black suit emerged from the vehicle. His eyes scanned the patio and locked directly onto me. He moved with a purpose that made the grass stand at attention, weaving through the frozen statues of my relatives until he stood before me. His voice was calm, clear, and carried across the yard with chilling authority. "General Elisa Morgan, the President requests your presence." Even my father froze in place. And the worst part? This condescending little scene wasn't new. It was just the final act of a play they'd been performing my entire life. To understand the silence in that yard, you have to understand the noise that came before it. Years and years of noise, all of it centered around one person. My cousin, Kevin, Rick's son, was the family's golden boy. He was a real estate agent with a bleached white smile, a perpetually fresh tan, and a personality built on loud, surface-level charisma. In my family's eyes, he was the sun, and everyone else, especially me, were just dull, distant planets who were lucky to be in his orbit. His successes were our successes. His new car was a topic of conversation for 6 months. His sales commissions were discussed with the same reverence some people reserve for religious scripture. I remember one dinner vividly. It was a celebration because Kevin had closed a big sale on a commercial property. He sat at the head of the table, telling a story that got grander with each retelling, full of his signature killer instinct and how he'd dominated the negotiation. My parents hung on his every word. At the end of the meal, my father, Mark, a former sales manager who worshipped the art of the deal, cleared his throat for an announcement. My mother, Susan, beamed beside him. They presented Kevin with a small, heavy box. Inside was a ridiculously expensive watch, a sleek silver monstrosity that cost more than my first car. "To look the part," my father said, his voice thick with pride. "You've got to have the right tools for the job." The whole family applauded, and I sat there, a letter in my purse feeling like a lead weight. It was my acceptance letter to a highly competitive cybersecurity program at Georgetown, a dream I had worked tirelessly for. Later that evening, I tried to show it to my dad. He glanced at the letterhead for a fraction of a second before handing it back to me, his attention already drifting back toward Kevin. "That's nice, honey," he said, his tone distracted. "Just make sure you pick a practical field. Something stable." The contrast was a physical blow. Kevin's flashy win was an investment. My life-changing achievement was a footnote, a risk to be managed. That quiet dismissal was a paper cut compared to the wound that came a year later. I'd been given the opportunity to take a specialized training course in encrypted network analysis. This wasn't just a course, it was a key. It was the gateway to the kind of work I was truly passionate about, the kind of work that happens in shadows and silence. The only problem was the price tag. $5,000 I simply didn't have. For the first time in years, I went to my parents for help. I laid out the brochure on the kitchen table, my hands shaking slightly as I explained how important it was, how it would define my entire career path. My mother picked up the brochure, her brow furrowed with concern, but not for my future. "Oh, sweetie, that's a lot of money," she said softly, as if I didn't know. She exchanged a look with my father before continuing. "And besides, Kevin is looking to buy his first condo. We promised we'd help him with the down payment, to get him started in the market. We have to prioritize. Prioritize." The word hung in the air between us. The internal ledger in my mind began to flip through pages. The braces I was told were too expensive. The school trips I didn't really want to go on. The ancient laptop I'd had to save up for 3 years to replace on my own. Then my father delivered the line he always used, the one that was meant to sound like a compliment but felt like a cage. He put a hand on my shoulder. "You're the responsible one, Elisa," he said, with a sad, knowing smile. "You'll figure it out. You always do." And there it was. It wasn't a vote of confidence. It was my job description in the family. It was an excuse to wash their hands of me, to release them from the burden of providing the same support they gave so freely to Kevin. Being responsible didn't mean I was capable. It meant I was on my own. This was the false narrative they had all agreed to live by, the story they told themselves so they could sleep at night. In their world, Kevin's recklessness was reframed as ambition. His constant need for bailouts was a sign of his charming and driven nature. He was a high-risk, high-reward investment that required all their emotional and financial capital. Meanwhile, I was quiet and responsible. My independence wasn't a strength. It was a convenience. It meant I didn't need their help, so they didn't have to give it. They needed me to be the low-maintenance background character so they could pour everything into the golden child. My career in IT was the perfect, dismissible label for them. Safe, boring, and utterly unimportant. Lying in bed after that down payment conversation, staring at the ceiling, I realized they would never choose to see me. They couldn't. So I decided one day I wouldn't give them a choice. That $5,000 course was the best money I ever spent, not for the skills I learned, but for the clarity it bought me. Paying for it myself, with money I scraped together from freelance coding gigs, was the final cut of the cord. It was the moment I stopped asking for a seat at their table and started building my own. Their world of petty grievances and loud validation became a distant, muffled sound. My world, a world of encrypted data streams and silent, high-stakes decisions, came into sharp, brilliant focus. The anger I'd carried for years didn't explode, it simply evaporated, leaving behind a calm, cool resolve that felt more powerful than any rage. My receipts weren't angry text messages or highlighted bank statements showing their financial favoritism. My proof was my entire life, lived in the classified margins they never thought to look at. My receipts were the commendation for exceptional analysis under extreme pressure that I never framed. They were the promotion to team lead that I celebrated alone with a takeout pizza in a sterile temporary apartment. They were the dozens of non-disclosure agreements that walled off my real identity from the Elisa they thought they knew. Every challenge I faced, every silent crisis I helped avert in the dead of night, those were my receipts. They were all locked in a simple desk drawer, a quiet stack of papers that documented a person they would never, ever recognize. My boring it job was a carefully constructed cover, a narrative I let them believe because it was easy. I started at the National Security Agency, just another junior analyst sifting through digital mountains, but I was good at it. I was quiet, I was focused, and I saw the patterns everyone else missed. It wasn't long before I was headhunted for a new interagency task force, a place where my skills were not just valued but vital. I moved from analyst to team lead, then to a director role overseeing operations I still can't speak about. The work was everything. It was all-consuming, and eventually, it led to a position so sensitive it came with a title of immense authority. A title designed to cut through bureaucracy and command immediate action. There was no complex plot for revenge. I didn't need one. My plan was simply patience. I knew that eventually my two worlds would collide. It was an occupational hazard. When a high-threat situation began developing, I was put on immediate standby, my team informing me that a dedicated transport would be on call 24/7. The annual family barbecue was that same weekend. The old me would have made an excuse. But this time, I chose to walk right into that lion's den. I chose their backyard as the stage. I wasn't going to bring the evidence to them. I was going to let it come for me. I had the truth. I had the authority. All that was left was to let them light the match and wait for the perfect moment to show them what they were really burning. We returned to the scene at the barbecue, but it was a different world from the one I had left just moments ago. The air, once filled with my Uncle Rick's booming laugh, was now so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator from inside the house. It was a perfect tableau of shock. Burgers sat half-eaten on paper plates. Plastic cups were frozen halfway to lips. My uncle's mouth was still open, but the mocking laughter was dead in his throat, replaced by a slack-jawed, gaping horror. His face, usually ruddy with self-satisfaction, had gone a pale, sickly white. Beside him, my cousin Kevin, the family's golden boy, looked like a cheap mannequin. His expensive watch and flashy smile were useless now. The smugness had evaporated, leaving behind a raw, confused panic. He kept glancing from me to the imposing man in the suit, then to the black SUV idling in the driveway, as if trying to solve a math problem far beyond his comprehension. And my mother, her hand clamped over her mouth, just stared. Her eyes were wide with a terror that had nothing to do with my safety and everything to do with the complete and utter implosion of her neatly ordered universe. The narrative she had dedicated her life to upholding had just been torched. The man in the suit, my executive officer, didn't so much as glance at my stunned family. To him, they were irrelevant, just part of the scenery. His focus was entirely, respectfully, on me. "General, the situation has escalated," he repeated, his voice a low, urgent hum that cut through the silence. "We need to move. Now?" I gave him a slight, almost imperceptible nod. My heart was beating a steady, calm rhythm. After years of chaos, this felt simple. "Understood, Major," I replied. My own voice even. The word Major hung in the air. Another bomb dropped into their laps. Another piece of a puzzle they didn't even know existed. It wasn't just me. My entire world operated on a level of authority they couldn't grasp. As I turned to leave, a choked sound finally broke the spell. It was my father. "Elisa? General?" His voice was a strained whisper, cracked and fragile. This was a man who respected two things in this world: money and a clear chain of command. He'd spent my entire life dismissing me because I had neither. Now, confronted with a truth that gave me an authority he could only dream of, his mind simply broke. The daughter he'd written off as an insignificant IT tech held a title that outranked anyone he had ever met. The cognitive dissonance was a physical thing, twisting his features into a mask of pure disbelief. I paused and looked directly at him, at all of them. There was no anger left in me. There was no desire to gloat. There was only a profound, quiet finality. I had spent a lifetime begging them to see me, and now they couldn't look away. "I have to go, Dad," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "National security." Those 3 words were the gravestone for the daughter they thought they knew. It was the truth, and it was also the perfect wall. It was an explanation that offered no details, a door that was slamming shut in their faces forever. The reactions came in waves. Uncle Rick looked physically ill, like he was about to vomit onto the pristine lawn. The dawning realization of who he'd just tried to humiliate was washing over him, and it was pulling him under. Kevin just stared at his own hands, at the ridiculous watch my parents had bought him. His entire world, built on flashy commissions and German cars, had just been revealed for what it was, pathetic and small. And my mother finally let out a sob. But it wasn't a cry of pride, or even shock. It was a sound of pure loss, the loss of her comfortable reality. She was crying for the death of the simple story she had told herself about her simple daughter. But the most powerful reaction was my father's silence. He just stood there, utterly defeated by a truth he had never once bothered to look for. His shoulders slumped, not in relief, but in the crushing weight of his own ignorance. In that moment he saw it all, every dismissive comment, every overlooked achievement, every time he'd chosen the easy narrative over the complex daughter standing right in front of him. His useless child held a responsibility for the nation that he couldn't even fathom. The silence from him was louder than all of Rick's taunts combined. I gave one last, small nod, and turned my back on them for good. And as the heavy door of the SUV closed, sealing me off from their world of smoke and mirrors, I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt free. For the first time, I was the one driving away. The ride away from the house was silent. Inside the climate-controlled quiet of the SUV, my major spoke in low, clipped tones about the unfolding situation, giving me a preliminary brief. It was a world of coded language, satellite imagery, and immediate, critical decisions. It was my world. And as we sped down the highway, leaving my family's little cul-de-sac behind, my phone began to light up. It was a frantic, desperate explosion of communication from a reality that already felt a million miles away. My screen was a waterfall of notifications, missed calls, and a torrent of text messages that painted a picture of absolute panic. My mother's texts were a stream of consciousness, a jumble of frantic apologies, exclamation points, and terrified questions. "Elisa, honey, I am so sorry. We had no idea. A general, please call me. Are you safe? What is happening?" Her messages were laced with a new kind of fear, the fear of the unknown, the fear that she had monumentally misjudged something vital. Then came a message from my Uncle Rick. It was a formal, groveling paragraph that was so out of character it was almost comical. He apologized for his little joke, calling me an esteemed member of the community and a credit to the family. It was the terrified fawning of a man who suddenly realized the person he'd been kicking was not a stray dog, but a sleeping lion. From my cousin Kevin, there was only silence. I imagined him sitting in the wreckage of the barbecue, his world of easy wins and unearned praise now feeling hollow and fragile. For the first time in his life, he wasn't the center of attention, and he had no idea how to handle it. I read their messages with a strange sense of detachment, like an anthropologist studying the bizarre rituals of a newly discovered tribe. There was no anger, no satisfaction. Just a quiet, clinical observation of their chaos. I didn't reply to any of them. I simply put my phone on silent and turned my attention back to the major. The past was finally in the past. My future was waiting on a secure line. Hours later, after the initial crisis had been managed, and I was in a sterile temporary command center 1,000 miles from home, a single new message came through. It was from my father. Unlike the others, his was short. Just 6 words that carried the weight of 30 years of misunderstanding. "I am so sorry. And so proud." I stared at those words for a long time. There was no excuse, no justification, just a raw admission. The pride I had craved from him as a little girl, the validation I had desperately sought as a young woman. It was finally here. And the tragedy was, I no longer needed it. I typed back a simple reply, the only one that felt true. "Thank you." It was an acknowledgement, not an absolution. It was a full stop, not an ellipsis. It was closure. A year passed. My life found a new rhythm, one defined by me and me alone. I moved into a new apartment in the city, a place with high ceilings and big windows that let in the morning light. It was my sanctuary, a space that was entirely mine, filled only with things that brought me peace, books, plants, and quiet. My job was still demanding, a constant thrum of high-stakes pressure that existed just below the surface of my life. But it was a world where I was seen, where my skills were valued, and where my contributions mattered. The difference was, when I came home, I closed the door on it all and entered a world of profound, beautiful silence. I learned that my true identity wasn't General Morgan, and it certainly wasn't the useless it-tech. It was just Elisa, a woman who enjoyed the simple pleasure of watering her plants on a Saturday morning. I still see my family, but on my terms. I visit for a few hours on major holidays. The dynamic is completely different. The old roles of golden child and invisible child have been incinerated, replaced by a new, awkward hierarchy. They treat me with a sort of fearful reverence now, speaking to me in careful, measured tones, as if I were a visiting dignitary. My father tries to talk to me about world events, fishing for inside information I will never give him. My mother fusses over me, asking if I need anything, a question she never thought to ask when I actually did. Uncle Rick just nods at me from across the room, terrified to make another little joke. Kevin, in many ways, is the most telling. He has continued his life, still chasing deals and driving flashy cars. But the shine is gone. When I am in the room, his stories fall flat. His success, once the dazzling center of the family's universe, now feels like a flickering candle next to a hidden sun. They haven't really changed, not in their core. But they no longer have any power over me. Their opinions are just noise outside a soundproof room. I didn't get revenge by destroying them. I found my freedom by simply revealing who I was, and letting them grapple with the truth that they were the ones who had been blind all along. I learned that sometimes the only way to find your place in the world is to leave the one you were assigned. If you've ever had to become your own hero, leave a comment below. I see you.